Welcome to this beautiful view in a place called the Torrent of the Arnon. That simply means that all of this water that you can see, there's even a dam back there. This is all runoff from the flash floods in the deserts. In fact, that water even comes as far away as Saudi Arabia. It eventually makes its way down this torrent and into the Dead Sea. So we are here because there were hermits that lived in this valley. There were also hermits, and we'll talk about, well, he's kind of a hermit. It's a unique vocation of a man called Saint Simon the Stylite. So he is considered, of course, one of the spiritual fathers. We could call him a desert father. And so we'll be looking at where he lived right over this hill in a place called ar-Rasas, where there is still the tower where, if he didn't live there, certainly many other people who followed his same vocation did. So what makes this valley important? Well, we are in a place called, well, anciently called Moab. And right behind me, this pathway that we've taken that you can see to my right, that is actually the ancient King's Highway. So any of the kings or any other, trade people who wanted a safe passage all the way from very far north down to Egypt. I believe it went from Memphis all the way up into the mountains of Turkey, but even into Persia and further. This was the highway that connected them all. And so most certainly the ancient Israelites would have traveled this way. In fact, they did travel this way. They asked permission from the Moabite king to pass through here. He denied them that passage. They eventually went to another place, the Ammonites. They also denied them passage, and they made war. At that point, the king here asked Balaam to curse the Israelite people. And this is the reason why. Let me just read this for you. This is from Numbers, and it says, "When the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho," and we're very close to that area, "and Balak the son of Zippor saw that all of Israel had done to the Amorites because they defeated them when they wouldn't let them pass through, they were concerned. And so Moab was overcome with fear," and it says, this was the king said this to the elders of Midian. Remember, they were just to the south. "This horde," meaning the Israelites, "will now lick up all that is around us as one ox licks up the grass of the field." A very interesting perspective there. But anyway, it says that he went to find Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, and this was near the river, and called him, saying, "Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now and curse them for me." I think, we all know this story, that Balaam couldn't. He wanted to. He was paid to do this, but he couldn't curse them because every time he tried, God stopped him. But the most, I think, infamous moments is when he was riding his donkey. And it says here that the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road, because the Lord God is faithful to his covenant people that are coming out. So the donkey, when he saw the angel of the Lord, turned aside from the road, perhaps this very road right here. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall because Balaam wanted her to keep going. And then finally, the third time she sees the angel of the Lord, she lays down under Balaam. He's really irritated, starts smacking his donkey, and so the donkey's not too happy. And this is what happens in verse 28. "The Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, 'What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?'" And then Balaam actually addresses the donkey. I think this is really funny. They have a conversation. And he says, "Because you've made a fool of me. I should kill you right now." But the donkey responds, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden your whole life to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way?" And then the angel of the Lord appears to Balaam and says, "Why have you struck the donkey 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me." So all of this is talking about the Israelites coming through here and how the Lord is protecting them. Now, this land of Moab was, I think most people not only know it because of Balaam and the donkey, but also because David's great-grandmother came from here, Ruth. And so they grow a lot of barley and wheat in this area, of course, but way, way, way before that is when all of this happened with the ancient Israelites. And also at that time, even at the time of Ruth, they worshipped a god called Kamōš, or Kamōš. But they did have human sacrifice to this god. The god was a god of war, a god of military battles, and so you can bet that they were wanting to invoke him so they could defeat the Israelites as they were coming through. And I think it's remarkable to think that the people living in the land were totally concerned because there were so many that were brought out of Egypt. I mean, that's just incredible. So this god, actually, they even say that, the king sacrificed his own son to the god of Kamōš. So in different battles, they would sacrifice their enemies as well. And in a battle at Mount Nebo, where Moses looked out over into the promised land, they took all of the lambs and sheep of the area when they conquered that entire city and offered them to the god of Kamōš. So if you think about this, there's a lot to pray for in this area. They eventually did become, some of them became, followed the Jewish faith, and many in the Byzantine era became Christian. In fact, in ar-Rasas, where we have this Stylite tower, they have found 8, I think it's 8, maybe it's 5, but there's a whole series of Byzantine churches, one right next to the other, with beautiful mosaics. This whole area of Magdala is known for their mosaics. And this gives witness to the Christian faith, as does that tower, which is right next to those churches, as do the hermitages down here in this valley. Now you think about the desert. We've seen a lot of scenes of sand and heat and sun. But the desert is also this: cold, freezing wind, unknown temperatures. You don't know if it's going to rain. It snows in this area as well. The desert is a place of harshness. And so the desert fathers actually looked for places like this to become the new martyrs once martyrdom had ended. So let's talk about Saint Simon the Stylite. So what on earth is this tower? What on earth is a Stylite? As a child, I always thought this is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of in my life. Well, it's from the ancient Greek word of stylite, or stylites, which means pillar dweller. And so this is a pillar saint. And so it's a Christian ascetic, a father who lives on pillars. What do? They pray, they fast, and they preach. But they wanted to be far away from the people. And so they decided to start building towers. Now, if you look at the reason why they would do something like this, because it's really weird, is the same way that people would want to follow the Lord as hermits. It's a radical sacrifice. Now, the church doesn't counsel this at all today. In fact, one of, I believe it was St. Simon himself, when he began his journey, was so zealous for the Lord, just like St. Francis of Assisi, he went overboard with this ascesis, and he took a rope from the well of the community and wrapped it all around his body so tightly because he wanted to control his flesh. You know, he saw this fight between the flesh and the spirit, and he said, you know, I've got this tendency. I want to always keep myself focused on the spirit. And he started damaging himself, but you're like, okay, that's a little bit too much. And the abbot even told him this. And that's eventually why he left the monastery and then started a different way of life, always looking to do something radical for the Lord. So people would come to ask his advice. They would come and ask advice from the people in the caves because they're seeking solitude and silence.
Simon became exasperated by so many people, by the crowds, and so he climbed onto the top of a column to escape them, allowing him to pray in silence and solitude. Apparently, this escape so refreshed him that he refused to come down, except to mount an even higher tower, eventually settling on a 60-foot-high platform for his last 30 years of life. And so devoted monks and admirers would bring him food.
Now, I want to just tell you a little bit about his life. He was a shepherd. He was shepherding his sheep. He was near church, and he went to listen to the epistles of St. Paul that were being read, and I think the Acts of the Apostles as well. And this filled him with a fire. It talks a lot about what happens to us when we listen to the Word of God. And so he talked to a priest, and he gave him advice. He says, flee, be silent, and pray. Now there's another desert father named ar-Rasas. He was a Roman educator who also exchanged his status for the solitude of the Egyptian desert and prayed almost the same thing. He said, Lord, lead me into the way of salvation. And then he heard a voice saying, be silent. Be silent. Because silence completes and intensifies solitude. And this is the connection or the conviction and the connection that all the desert fathers share. And I think we spoke about at the very beginning of our pilgrimage, Abbot Macarius. And he said this. Well, it's said of him, once the Abbot Macarius, after he had given the benediction to the brethren in the church in Skeet, he said to them, brethren, fly away. One of the elders answered him, how can we fly further than this, seeing we are here in the desert? Then Macarius placed his finger on his mouth and said, fly from this. And so saying, he shut the door. Again, silence is the way to make solitude a reality. And the Desert Fathers praise silence as, in a certain sense, the safest way to God, because it's the way that we can hear him. I've often repented of having spoken, ar-Rasas said, the Desert Father I quoted at the beginning, but never of having remained silent. So in a way, we can take this into our own lives and hearts during this Lent. Silence is an indispensable discipline in a way in the spiritual life. Ever since James described silence, from his letter, James 3:3, the tongue, he says, has the whole wicked world in itself. And he says it's like putting a bit in the horse's mouth. And if you've studied classical philosophy, that simply means you've got this incredibly powerful wild animal. When you put a bit in its mouth, you can control it. You can control it, and all of the potential comes forth. And I think that's what he was referring to. So it's a way of practicing self-control, but it's essential for many different things in our lives, from teaching and learning, preaching and worship, visiting and counseling. None of those things can happen without real silence. It's really concrete, it's practical, and it's useful discipline in everything that we do. And some of the Desert Fathers actually talk about it as a portable cell that you can take with you and retreat into. And that's what the Desert Fathers were trying to do. Now, when Simon the Stylite left for his life, he actually made a beautiful prayer. And this is what he says, because again, if you read about his life more in detail, it is quite unusual. But this was his whole purpose. He said, I yield thee glory, Jesus Christ, my God, for all the blessings which thou hast heaped upon me, and for the grace which thou hast given me, that I should embrace this manner of life. But thou knowest that in ascending this pillar, I lean on thee alone, and that to thee alone I look for the happy issue of mine undertaking. Accept then my object. Strengthen me, that I finish this painful course. Give me the grace to end it in holiness. And as God revealed himself to Moses as the Holy One, the first time he ever says that, this is where holiness comes from, leaning on him alone. So when we think about silence, I had mentioned in an earlier moment about the Bedouin child we saw in the desert, completely engrossed in his cell phone. Well, when we were in the desert, the sandy desert in the south of the country, and we went into a Bedouin tent where there's no electricity, and they made lunch for us over a fire and banged up pots. It was very much like a campsite in the Rockies where I'm from, but definitely in the desert, protecting us from the cold wind and smoky. It was really interesting. Everything was incredible, and you just want to sit down with them and learn about their lives. And you turn to these Bedouins, one who looks 100, but who's probably 50 years old because he was in the wind and the sun of the desert and the cold for so many years. They were engrossed in their telephones. They were looking at a lot of things, and suddenly their eyes weren't looking at their guests. And Bedouins are known for hospitality. The interaction with reality and with who's in front of them, in a way, was lost. And I was thinking about this as we then mounted on some camels and started walking through the desert. And at one point when I was off the camel and the Bedouins were going off with them back to their own camp, just watching them in the sunrise walk, a camel gait is so paused and so elegant. It has a rhythm of its own. I would call it a rhythm, the rhythm of the desert. In a certain sense, it's the rhythm of the desert fathers. It's almost, even when they trot, because you can trot on camels, it's not fast. It's not like an Arabian horse that races. No. It almost invites you, not just to a different rhythm, but it invites you to silence, to go slower, to step out of the frenetic pace of the world and to listen. And I think this is what the desert fathers, including the Stylites, invite us to do. He went out, just like we're invited to go out of Egypt. But to do that, we have to hear first. We have to listen first so that we can what? Enter into relationship with him. People come for spiritual counsel, as I said to these people. You can imagine putting a ladder against this tower and trying to scream up to the Stylite. In fact, I think it's difficult to see him. They didn't want a lot of people close by so they could have this silence. And they found him, I think, 3 days after he had died because he didn't answer somebody who came up to ask him for advice. So just really, really unique. But they went because they wanted to share and to be enriched. So to have a relationship and a connection with someone, with the person in front of me and with God, this covenant relationship demands silence. And I think in today's world, it's so easy with so much on social media, so much connection with so many things. We have sort of a reaction to things rather than a connection. I wouldn't say that this type of reactive lifestyle makes us more dignified and makes us more connected with anybody, especially not with the Lord. So in that sense, the Desert Fathers have a very good point to make to us today. And that is that silence is the home of the Word. We are surrounded by so many words, so much stimulation in the world of today. But silence gives strength and fruitfulness to those words, or to the Word. Not the Word made flesh, but I think that's appropriate. But the Word, any word that's said. Because we can even say that words are meant to disclose a mystery, the mystery of the silence from whence they come. And there's a book written about the Desert Fathers, which I really like, and I'll put the title in the notes below. But in this book, they're making a relationship between the Desert Fathers and a Chinese philosopher. And this is what he says. It just explains this perfectly, I think. It says, the purpose of a fish trap is to catch fish, and when the fish are caught, the trap is forgotten. The purpose of a rabbit snare is to catch rabbits. When the rabbits are caught, the snare is forgotten. The purpose of the word is to convey ideas. When the ideas are grasped, the words are forgotten. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words? He is the one I would like to talk to. I would like to talk to the man who has forgotten words. It's almost a Desert Father saying right there. So the word is an instrument of the present world, and silence is the mystery of the future world. So silence protects the inner fire that all of these men and women of the desert had in their hearts. In a sense, they say that silence guards the inner heat of religious emotion and experience. And this inner heat is the life of the Holy Spirit within us. I suppose that's what kept them warm on days like today. So silence is the discipline by which the inner fire of God is tended and kept alive. And that's actually what one of the Desert Fathers spoke about. He was a Turkish Desert Father, and he spoke about a bath, a steam bath. He says, don't leave the door open of a steam bath. All of the heat goes out, and then it doesn't serve for anything. And that's the point of silence. So in our chatty world, in which the word has lost its power to communicate in many ways, silence helps us to keep our mind and heart anchored in the future world and allows us to speak from there a creative and recreative word to the present world. So I think the Desert Fathers simply believed that not speaking was an important practice, right? Because too often our words can be superfluous, inauthentic, and shallow, just chatting about things when I don't have a deep or depth to share. So that's a discipline. But more important than that, I think this is the message of the Desert Fathers, is that silence is above all a quality of the heart that can stay with us even in our conversation with others. That portable cell that we can carry with us wherever we go. So in this portable cell, we find ourselves immersed in that divine silence. And that's my prayer for each and every one of you today. As we leave this windy valley on this cold, cold day in the desert, and know that we're praying for you from here, from the Holy Land. And I hope we can see you again tomorrow. God bless you.